Tonight we're heading high into the Andes, so high your ears might pop and your lungs start negotiating for better working conditions. Picture this: an empire stretched across jagged cliffs, endless deserts, and thick jungles. No steel. No wheels. No horses, well, not the kind you ride. And yet, a road system longer than the distance from New York to Buenos Aires somehow snakes through it all. You trudge up a steep, uneven path, your feet sliding slightly with every step, the air thinning, your breath shorter. The stone beneath your soles is cool, ancient, and unsettlingly smooth, laid with eerie precision centuries before bulldozers or blueprints. On one side, sheer drop. On the other, an intimidating vertical wall that seems to lean in just enough to remind you who's in charge. This is the Capac Nan, the Great Inca Road, and you're walking it without a guide, without GPS, and without a clue how it was even possible. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're feeling bold, post your location and the local time where you're watching. It's always fun to see who else is up wandering through history at odd hours. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing on the backbone of an empire, a stone spine stretching across nearly 24,000 miles of punishing terrain. The Inca Empire, or Tawantinsuyu, if you want to impress your trivia group, wasn't supposed to happen. Think about it: no written language, no money system, no wheeled vehicles, and they were building cities in the sky before it was cool. And yet, by the early 1500s, they controlled the largest empire in pre-Columbian America. From modern-day Colombia to central Chile, the Inca didn't just conquer with swords, they did it with steps. Literal ones. The roads were their lifelines, their power grid, their internet, and their postal service. And for you, tonight, they're your path into one of the wildest engineering marvels in history. You kneel to touch the stones beneath you. They're perfectly fitted, no mortar, no cement, just gravity and skill holding them together for centuries. Some of these paths are only a couple feet wide, others as broad as a two-lane road. But they all share one trait: they shouldn't still exist, and yet they do. These roads run over frozen passes 15,000 feet high, slink along jungle cliffs, and traverse bone-dry deserts. They don't care about comfort, they care about connection. At its height, the Inca Road network connected over 10 million people speaking dozens of languages. And they didn't just build roads, they built a system. Every stretch was carefully chosen. Roads clung to the mountains where the air is thin but stable, dodging the flooding lowlands. Some sections were carved directly into stone cliffs, others floated on reed mats across wetlands. And somehow, despite no written maps, the whole thing functioned with mind-bending accuracy. Historians still argue whether the network was built entirely by the Inca themselves or inherited from earlier cultures like the Wari, whose own road systems date back centuries. But what's undeniable is that the Inca expanded, refined, and unified it into something magnificent. You can almost hear the footsteps of thousands who came before: soldiers, messengers, traders, and pilgrims, all leaving traces you'll never see, but somehow feel. And the kicker: the Inca never even invented the wheel. You glance up at a ridge ahead, where the stone path climbs like a ribbon, winding around a cliff that looks just slightly too vertical to be safe. It's hard to imagine ox-drawn carts, or any carts, making it up there. That's because they didn't. The Inca didn't need wheels. They had llamas. And legs. Lots of legs. But that's a story for the next stretch of the journey. As you start walking again, a thin wind whistles through the pass. The temperature drops sharply, and mist coils over the stones like breath from the mountain itself. You squint toward the next bend, where a crumbling tambo, an old roadside building, sits perched like a watchful owl. It's made of the same stone as the road, naturally. It always is. The tambo once served as a supply point, shelter, or even a military outpost. You imagine an Inca soldier resting here 500 years ago, his sandals worn, his breath frosting in the air, just like yours. Maybe he's watching the same condor circling above, suspiciously eyeing anything that moves. Maybe he's worrying about the same thing you are: how far until the next one? Every empire has a heartbeat. Rome had its aqueducts, Egypt had the Nile, and the Inca? They had this road. It wasn't just for armies. It brought food, culture, tribute, and, yes, control. A local chieftain might be loyal to the empire, or not, but either way, this road was coming through his backyard. Want a quirky detail? The Inca imposed a kind of ancient traffic control. Commoners weren't allowed on certain royal roads without permission. No ID card, no entry. You could end up fined, beaten, or worse, turned around with a really long walk home. Kind of like being banned from the VIP lounge, except the lounge is the side of a cliff. And even now, in this moment, you realize what makes this road so remarkable isn't just the engineering, it's the audacity. The Inca looked at impossible landscapes and said, let's go through it. Over it. Around it. Sometimes under it. They refused to be boxed in by geography, and their stubbornness literally reshaped continents. You reach a fork in the road, one branch dives into a narrow gorge, the other climbs toward a snow-covered pass. Both look equally ridiculous. You shake your head and smile, realizing this is just the beginning. There's still jungle to trudge through, deserts to cross, and messages to deliver. And no wheels. Ever. You choose the mountain path. Not because it looks safer, it doesn't. But because it pulls at you. Higher and higher the stones climb, and soon you're stepping between ancient switchbacks cut into cliffs like some Inca architect decided to play Jenga with the Andes. Each twist and turn reveals another staggering view: jagged peaks piercing the clouds, valleys blanketed in mist, and, always, the road threading through it all with unsettling confidence. You're walking the impossible. This is a road that absolutely should not exist. It's like nature set the difficulty slider to nightmare mode and the Inca just shrugged and built a highway anyway. The Capac Nan, the Great Inca Road, didn't just cross diverse environments, it conquered them. From arid deserts where even shadows seem thirsty, to icy peaks where breathing feels like sipping soup through a straw, the road bent nature without breaking it. It adapted. It clung. It endured. And you're not the first to wonder how. Take a moment to glance at the stones underfoot. In many places, they're so precisely fitted you couldn't slide a butter knife between them. No mortar. No concrete. Just careful craftsmanship and a whole lot of patience. The Inca and earlier cultures they borrowed from used a technique called ashlar masonry, shaping stones to fit together like puzzle pieces. Each one hand-cut, moved without wheels or cranes, and laid by workers often drafted through a labor tax system called MITA. Fun detail: Inca engineers actually preferred earthquakes. No, really. Because earthquakes showed them how to build better. When a quake knocked down the weak stuff, the Inca paid attention. That's why their stonework, with no glue or binding agents, has outlived modern concrete buildings. Their walls flex. Yours crack. Historians still argue whether every part of the road was built entirely by the Inca, or if they co-opted and connected older paths made by groups like the Wari or the Tiwanaku. But the consensus is clear: the Inca turned that patchwork into a full-body network, one that could support an empire. If older roads were veins, the Inca turned them into arteries. And what arteries they were! The Capac Nan was more than just a single road, it was a system. The two main highways formed the spine. One traced the coast like a sunbather refusing to leave the beach, the other cut through the highlands like a daredevil on a zipline. Between them, thousands of smaller paths wove a web that tied together mountains, valleys, cities, and remote villages. You step onto a flatter stretch, your thighs quietly thanking you, and notice faint outlines where once a retaining wall held the mountain back from collapsing onto the road. These weren't just stone paths, they were engineered masterpieces. Drainage systems to prevent flooding, trenches and channels to redirect runoff, retaining walls to tame landslides. And in the jungle, wooden causeways, floating reed walkways in swamps, and yes, even stone steps up cliffs, like nature's most intense stairmaster. And remember, this road wasn't built for wheels. That's right. Not a single wheel turned on these paths. No carts. No wagons. Just feet, hoofed or human. The terrain made wheeled transport almost pointless. Can you imagine pushing a wooden cart up a slope so steep you need hands and knees to crawl it? Or dragging one through mud that swallows your shoes whole? The Inca figured, why waste effort building wheeled carts when you've got llamas and lungs? So instead, they built the road for what worked. It's a bit like designing a website today that runs perfectly on flip phones, not fancy, but shockingly efficient for the tools at hand. The path's width, incline, and materials were tailored to llama caravans and long-distance runners. No potholes, no clunky wooden wheels getting stuck. Just steady steps. Here's a fringe detail to chew on while you catch your breath. Some archaeologists believe that certain stretches of road were designed to sing. The way sound travels along stone walls and narrow passes, they theorize, could have helped runners communicate through echoes. Imagine a chuzki, a royal messenger, whistling into a canyon and hearing an answer from miles ahead. The Inca may have turned topography into tech. You reach a bend where the path narrows into a dizzying precipice, and you instinctively flatten yourself to the inner wall, heart drumming. There's no rail. There's never a rail. You edge forward, marveling at how this road was meant to be walked barefoot, or in sandals made of woven fiber. No boots. No rubber soles. Just determined toes and prayer. Yet people moved along it every day. Commoners on local paths. Royal couriers on express routes. Soldiers in file. Merchants with strings of llamas. Priests on sacred pilgrimages. This wasn't just a road. It was a theater. A lifeline. A flex. You pass the ruins of a roadside shrine and apacheta. Travelers once stopped here to leave small offerings, coca leaves, shells, even strands of hair, to ask the apis, the mountain spirits, for safe passage. You quietly add a pebble, not because you believe, necessarily, but because the road demands respect. It always has. The sun dips behind a peak, casting the valley below into an orange haze. The wind shifts, colder now, and you tug your poncho tighter, just like an Inca might have done centuries ago. You picture him, tall, lean, sun-darkened skin, carrying nothing but a message tied in knots or whispered in memory. Behind him, miles of road. Ahead of him, even more. And above it all, the question that won't let go of your brain: how did this road survive? It's not just stone or clever placement. It's something else, an understanding. The Inca didn't just fight the land, they listened to it. The road curves with the mountain, not against it. It yields to rivers, skirts swamps, ducks beneath overhangs. It's not stubborn. It's strategic. You take one last look at the twisting line behind you, and you realize, the Great Inca Road is not impressive despite the lack of wheels, it's impressive because of it. Every inch was built with limits in mind: no carts, no nails, no steel. Just stone, sweat, and strategy. The path narrows again ahead. You follow it, eyes forward, pulse steady. The night is coming, but the road continues. Always. You descend into a windswept plateau where the road flattens out, and for the first time tonight, you stop worrying about tumbling into a gorge. Here, the path stretches out in a calm, straight line, stones baked warm under the sun. It feels walkable, almost modern. But don't be fooled. This wasn't meant for your feet. It was meant for llamas. Yes, llamas. Those fuzzy, sometimes spitty, mostly dignified camelids you've seen in memes and gift shops. In the Inca Empire, they were the trucks, the mules, the Ubers of their day. And the roads, every incline, every curve, every width, were designed with them in mind. 4 legs, no wheels. Low maintenance, high stamina, excellent balance on steep terrain. You can practically hear their soft hooves padding over the stones, their ears flicking at the breeze, their eyes judging your cardio level. Llamas could carry about 50 to 70 pounds each. That doesn't sound like much until you realize they traveled in caravans of hundreds, sometimes thousands. Picture it, an endless procession of soft-footed pack animals winding through the highlands, bells jingling faintly, their herders calling out in Quechua, the air scented with dry grass and dust. The Incas didn't just accommodate llamas, they optimized for them. And here's where it gets quirky. The Inca didn't use saddles, carts, or wagons. Why? The terrain would eat those alive. Narrow paths? Check. Sharp switchbacks? Check. Sudden cliffs with no warning? Oh, definitely check. Wheeled transport wasn't just impractical, it was suicidal. A cart rolling downhill on an Inca grade would turn into a wooden missile faster than you can say gravity. So the Inca made their peace with biology. Llamas could scale slopes without slipping, graze along the way, and didn't need roads wider than their own fuzzy backsides. In fact, some roads were only 2 feet wide, just enough for a llama, not enough for a chariot. You think that's a limitation? The Inca called it efficiency. Historians still debate whether the Inca ever tried wheeled transport. Toy models with wheels have been found in South America, usually from earlier cultures. Did they play with the idea and reject it? Or was the wheel never even on the table? Nobody knows. What's clear is they looked at their mountains and thought, nope. Llamas, it is. And not just for cargo. These animals were crucial for military logistics, moving weapons, armor, food, and ceremonial items. In an empire without horses, until the Spanish showed up, these llama trains kept the heart of the state beating. Plus, they spit when annoyed, which is basically tactical defense. You spot hoof prints in the dust, the faint ghosts of ancient traffic. Alongside them, you notice a kind of rhythm to the path, stone segments placed with just enough space for a comfortable stride. Even the pacing of the road fits both human and llama gait, as if planned by someone who walked the whole thing barefoot, because they probably did. A breeze carries the scent of grass and old dung. It's not unpleasant, just earthy. Llama caravans were living, walking supply chains. They moved maize, potatoes, dried fish, salt, copper, textiles, feathers, and even gold. Imagine hundreds of them winding through the Andes, each wearing colorful woven blankets, decorated with tassels that signified their origin or purpose. It wasn't just function, it was pageantry. You pass a low stone wall, and beyond it lies the remnants of a corral, llama wazi, a rest stop specifically for animals. These weren't accidental. They were built regularly along the road so llamas could rest, graze, or be replaced. That's the thing, the Inca didn't just build roads. They built an entire infrastructure around the roads. Think of them as ancient highway service areas, but fluffier. You pause beside a massive flat stone, warm from the sun. Some archaeologists believe these served as way stations. Not with scales, but by experienced hands and eyes. Inca herders knew how much a llama could carry, and they managed loads with a kind of intuitive precision modern logistics engineers would admire. No spreadsheets. No barcodes. Just knowledge passed through generations. Here's a scholarly twist. Some researchers speculate that llamas themselves were a kind of mobile taxation system. Communities were required to provide llama teams for state use, not just goods. So when you saw a caravan go by, it wasn't just commerce, it was governance. The road was both a delivery route and a show of control. And still, no wheels. The longer you walk this road, the more absurd the wheel starts to seem. Why drag something heavy when the mountains themselves are barely holding still? Wheels demand flatness, stability, predictability. The Andes offer none of those things. Another fringe detail for your sleepy brain: the Inca may have used llama droppings for more than just fertilizer. On some routes, especially in the high passes, a mix of dung and straw might have been used to create temporary traction paths over snow or ice. That's right, llama poop as infrastructure. Not glamorous, but strangely effective. Like duct tape for the ancient world. You move again, the road dipping into a valley rich with green scrub and tiny violet flowers. Birds chirp lazily overhead. It's peaceful now, but you can imagine the bustle of traffic 5 centuries ago. Chasquis sprinting past. Nobles riding in litters. Merchants haggling. Herds of llamas gliding by, each step soft and unhurried, their eyes always half-lidded in a state of permanent judgment. And then there's you. Huffing and puffing, modern shoes squeaking slightly on ancient stones, trying not to trip over the past. You realize that the Inca didn't just avoid wheels because they lacked the idea. They chose this system. One that could scale vertical cliffs. One that could adapt to earthquakes. One that didn't need roads like Rome's, flat, wide, and sprawling. Theirs were lean, agile, intimate. Built for terrain, not domination. Your fingers trail along a wall as you pass it. It's not about what the Inca lacked. It's about what they knew and what they did with it. The road curves again ahead, hugging a hill that seems to ripple with ancient footprints. And somewhere beyond that bend, a runner, a bridge, a secret message. But for now, you follow the llama prints. Always forward. Always uphill. You hear it before you see it. A sharp exhale. Then another. Fast. Measured. Like the rhythm of a drum played with lungs. And then, out of the haze of the trail, a figure bursts around the bend, not running toward you, but through you. A blur of muscle, sandals, and urgency. The Chusquis. The Inca Empire didn't have radios. No written alphabet. No horses. But they had you, well, your ancient counterpart. The Chusquis, royal messengers trained from childhood to sprint across thousands of miles of mountainous terrain like human relay racers. You imagine yourself in their sandals. Literally. Worn, tightly woven, probably smelling like ambition and crushed coca leaves. The Chasquis weren't just runners. They were the nervous system of the empire. Information pulsed through their legs, commands, news, numbers, rumors, warnings. And they were fast. Historians estimate they could cover up to 150 miles in a single day using a relay system so precise it makes FedEx look like a game of broken telephone. Each runner carried a quipu, a coded bundle of knotted strings, or simply memorized a message word for word, often in Quechua or even multiple local dialects. And yes, this meant the whole success of a military order, a supply request, or a royal decree sometimes rested on one teenager's memory and cardiovascular health. You pass a small stone structure near the bend, a chasquiwazi, a message house. These were positioned every few miles along the royal road, and this is where the magic happened. As one runner arrived, panting, he'd call out the message to the next, who'd already be warmed up and ready to bolt. No scrolls changing hands. Just breath, voice, and trust. Fringe detail for the trivia drawer: some Chasquis supposedly chewed coca leaves during their runs, both to stave off hunger and boost endurance. It's like a natural energy gel, except, mildly narcotic. And legal at the time. The Inca state relied on this messenger system for everything: census data, festival announcements, military maneuvers. Even the emperor himself depended on it. The Sapa Inca could be hundreds of miles from a battlefield and still issue precise commands, thanks to these human Wi-Fi hotspots. The Spanish were stunned by this system, faster than their own horse-mounted couriers in many cases, and all on foot. You sit on the edge of a wall near the message house and imagine the switch. One runner staggering in, lungs burning, sweat glistening on sun-darkened skin, and another bursting forward without even a goodbye. Seamless. Timed. You can almost hear the call of the message carried forward, like a baton of air. Historians still argue whether these runners carried messages verbatim or used a kind of encoded shorthand based on the quipu. Some believe they even used small carved tokens or visual symbols to aid memory, especially for complex orders. But there's one thing scholars agree on: it worked. Really well. And not just for news. You follow the path down to a valley where a line of tambos once stood, rest houses for chasquis and traveling officials. These weren't roadside inns. They were stocked depots, miniature forts, and information hubs all at once. Some tambos stored dried food, spare sandals, even weapons. The empire wasn't just prepared for emergencies, it anticipated them. As a modern traveler, this system feels impossibly human. No wheels, no electricity, no centralized data centers, just lungs, legs, and limestone. But the road made it possible. Every message depended on the road being intact, unblocked, and navigable. One landslide could silence a whole province. Which is why the Inca kept it obsessively maintained. You pass another crumbling message house and wonder what secrets it once heard. A royal birth. A peasant uprising. A war that never came. These walls have no ears anymore, but they held some of the most important whispers in history. And here's a little cultural wrinkle. Chasquis were more than athletes, they were honored professionals. They were trained from a young age, fed well, and given high social status. In some cases, they even served as bodyguards or scouts. Imagine a cross between a Navy SEAL and a marathon runner, with a PhD in oral tradition. In one hand, they carried the quipu, which we'll untangle later. In the other, a pututu, a trumpet made from a conch shell. They'd blow it as they approached a message house to alert the next runner. The sound, deep, haunting, and low, would echo across the valleys. You can almost hear it now, bouncing off the cliffs, vibrating in your chest. Putu. Even now, in modern Andean communities, echoes of this tradition survive. Some festivals include ceremonial runs. Families tell stories of ancestors who ran from Cusco to Quito and back. The path you're on isn't just history, it's living memory. But don't get romantic about it just yet. Being a chasqui wasn't easy. High altitude, thin air, wild terrain. No fancy sneakers or performance gear, just natural grit and probably very well-developed calves. Some routes required vertical climbs, rope bridges, or ice-covered steps. Others involved night runs through jungle paths filled with, let's say, bitey wildlife. You crest a small hill and gaze out over a long, straight stretch of road disappearing into golden grassland. You imagine dozens of chasquis crisscrossing this space, running from sunrise to dusk. The road doesn't rest. It pulses. It breathes. Here's a tidbit from the fringe. Some Andean folklore claims the fastest chasquis could communicate with spirits or summon animals to protect them. They were seen as both physical and spiritual messengers, bridging not just distance, but realms. You might not buy it, but after the altitude kicks in and your ears pop again, it doesn't sound entirely far-fetched. You step off the path momentarily and sit beneath a twisted tree. The wind tugs at your hair. Far in the distance, a hawk circles above the road like it, too, is keeping watch. Maybe it remembers. Maybe it waits for the next runner. And you wonder, in a world without phones, without paper, without wheels, how did people keep an empire talking? The answer: they ran. You step back onto the path and almost instantly regret it. Because now the road disappears. Well, not entirely. But it thins to a strip barely wider than your shoulders and launches itself across a yawning ravine like it's lost all sense of self-preservation. There's no stone underfoot anymore, just a narrow stretch of rope and woven grass that sags ever so slightly with the weight of history. And now, you. Welcome to the Inca Suspension Bridge, a marvel of pre-modern engineering and a certified heart attack in cable form. This isn't some creaky wooden drawbridge with dramatic chains. It's a Huachuca, a bridge spun entirely from braided grass and human nerve. Every fiber was hand-twisted, bound together into thick cables, and stretched across canyons that would give modern thrill-seekers sweaty palms. You test the first step and feel it sway gently, like a hammock that wants to murder you. And the craziest part? These bridges weren't rare. Hundreds of them once spanned rivers and ravines throughout the empire. Whenever the road met a chasm, and there were plenty in the Andes, the Inca didn't go around. They went over. Each bridge was a community effort. Locals from nearby villages were responsible for maintaining and rebuilding it, sometimes annually. It wasn't just a civic duty, it was a spiritual one. The bridge was alive, sacred. It needed care, not just ropes. Offerings were made to the mountain gods before construction began. Children learned how to weave the cords from their parents and grandparents. You weren't just fixing a bridge. You were inheriting it. Fringe fact: the final step in building some bridges involved smearing the woven grass with a mix of clay and ashes to weatherproof it, a bit like ancient Scotchgard. Not exactly OSHA compliant, but effective enough to keep armies marching and messengers running. You inch forward, heart hammering. The bridge bounces slightly with each step, but not enough to panic yet. It feels oddly secure, in a makeshift roller coaster kind of way. You grip the side ropes, which are thick and coarse, each one braided so tight you could bounce a coin off them. The view below: a churning river, angry and oblivious to your fragile little human drama. Historians still argue whether these bridges were strong enough to carry large armies or just couriers and llamas. Some say troops crossed one at a time, others claim entire companies passed in sequence, separated by strict spacing rules. But no one denies their power. When the Spanish arrived, they stared at these grass bridges like they'd stumbled into a hallucination. Some couldn't bring themselves to walk across. Others fell. But the Inca, they ran. And yes, there are still communities in Peru that build these bridges today. One of the last living examples is rebuilt every year over the Apurimac River, using the same techniques and same materials as their ancestors. The tradition never broke. The ropes never snapped. You make it to the halfway point. The wind picks up. The bridge sways a little more now, creaking softly. You pause. Somewhere behind you, a ghost Chuzki might be shaking his head, unimpressed by your hesitation. Another curious twist: these bridges weren't just tools, they were tactics. In times of rebellion or invasion, the Inca could cut a bridge to stop enemies in their tracks. No wheelbarrows, no battering rams, no siege towers could cross. Only runners knew the ropes. Literally. It's said that during the Spanish conquest, some of the last Inca loyalists fled into the jungle and cut the bridges behind them, leaving the invaders stranded, blinking at the abyss. You finally step off the far end, legs trembling not just from fear, but awe. That thing shouldn't have worked. And yet, it did. 4 centuries. Over and over again. Made from nothing more than woven grass and community resolve. Just past the bridge is a carved platform with the remnants of stone markers. Some say these were checkpoints, where runners paused to deliver reports, or where tax officers tallied goods crossing the bridge. Others believe they were ceremonial. The Inca often blended bureaucracy with the sacred. If you were crossing into a new province, You weren't just changing locations, you were entering someone else's domain. Even geography was political. You imagine a runner pausing here, whispering a prayer to the river below, tying his quipu tighter around his waist. One deep breath and then gone again, feet barely touching the bridge. You might have noticed by now that this entire road system wasn't about comfort. The steps are uneven. The grades are steep. The air is thin. But that was the point. The road was made to endure, not to pamper. It was built for survival, not yours, necessarily, but the Empire's. And don't forget, these bridges weren't just built across rivers. In the jungle, they spanned tree canopies. In swamps, they floated. In deserts, they followed paths of stone piles, cairns stacked like breadcrumbs to mark your way. The Inca solved problems not with brute force, but with elegance. They didn't force the land to change. They danced with it. Another little gem for you. The Inca used something called ichu grass, a high-altitude fiber found only in the Andes, to make these bridges. It's scratchy, light, and incredibly strong when braided. Your hands still tingle from gripping it. And here's a cheeky thought. Next time your phone charger frays after 2 months, remember that grass rope bridges lasted entire seasons, sometimes longer than your attention span. The sun sinks low now, spilling gold across the canyon, making the bridge glow like it's lit from within. You sit on a nearby stone, watching the wind tug at the ropes, gently swinging like the lull of a cradle. You wonder if the Inca ever crossed in silence, just the wind, the groan of the fibers, and the eternal hush of the mountains. No foot traffic. No travelers. Just waiting. The road continues ahead. Another tambo. Another climb. But this bridge. This was the test. And you passed. Barely. You wake up sore. Somehow you slept beside the trail, wrapped in your poncho, head resting on a stone that was not nearly as flat as it looked last night. But the bridge is behind you, and ahead the road levels out again, wide and regal, almost smug in its elegance. This isn't the kind of narrow cliffside trail you've been wobbling across. This is a real road, broad, flat, double-laned, 4-foot traffic, not Teslas, lined with low walls and bordered by shrines. It stretches confidently forward, and for a second, you feel like royalty. Because, surprise, you are now walking the Capac Nan proper. The Royal Road. Not all Inca roads were created equal. Some were humble dirt paths winding between farms. Others were slippery jungle causeways where you could barely keep your balance. But the Capac Nan, meaning the Noble Road, was different. This was the Inca Empire's high-speed lane. Only the elite used it. And you, dear sleeper, are now trespassing. Well, kind of. Let's talk social zoning. The Royal Road was reserved for the Emperor, his court, high officials, and military expeditions. Not just anyone could step on it. Without imperial permission, you could be fined or punished for even touching its polished stones. It was both road and ritual, a visible thread of power stretched across a continent. Fringe fact: there were guards stationed at checkpoints along the road not to collect tolls, but to enforce class boundaries. Think TSA, but with slingshots and feathers in their headdresses. Ordinary folk took the side paths. The big dogs walked here. But it wasn't all pomp. This road was also pragmatic. It linked the 4 Suyus, or regions, of the empire: Chinque Suyu in the northwest, Anti Suyu in the east, Kunti Suyu to the southwest, and Kola Suyu in the southeast, all converging on Cusco, the imperial capital. Think of Cusco like the belly button of the empire, and every road like a nerve connecting back to that center. You pass a crossroads where a marker stone once stood, a sewa, used to measure distance or divide territory. And suddenly, you realize something. This entire road system wasn't just a feat of engineering. It was a map. A 3-dimensional spreadsheet. A living document. Every bend, every tambo, Every bridge was data, tracking movement, control, and hierarchy. Historians still argue whether the Inca thought of the road system as a sacred object in itself, or simply a very efficient tool. But to the people who walked it, it was clearly both. Rituals were performed before new stretches were opened. Sacred mountains, or apis, were honored during construction. It wasn't just paving, it was prayer. You turn down a side road now, one narrower, dustier, with grass creeping into the cracks. It winds toward a cluster of stones half swallowed by the earth. You're looking at the remnants of a dead end. Or so it seems. But there were no real dead ends in the Inca road system, just selective terminations. Some roads weren't meant to connect cities. They were meant to lead to nowhere on purpose. Strategic ends. Remote garrisons. Ritual sites. Even prisons. These false trails funneled enemies into traps or led suspicious travelers away from sensitive locations. Quirky detail. Some roads may have led only to huacas, sacred places in nature. A perfectly round lake. A cave believed to be a birthplace of the gods. A jagged rock formation that marked the sun's return. Imagine building an entire stretch of stone road, not to access a town or mine, but to reach a boulder and leave offerings. That's dedication. Or devotion. Or maybe both. You double back to the royal road and keep walking. The wind picks up, bringing with it the scent of dust, dry grass, and something sweet, chicha, maybe, the faint echo of corn beer once poured at a wayside celebration. You stumble across another tambo, not grand, but sturdy. Its walls are still standing, its niches empty but elegant. You step inside and imagine it centuries ago, stocked with dried meat, charqui, corn, salt, and spare sandals. Officials resting inside, brushing dust from their cloaks. Llamas outside, munching lazily. The empire, even in its smallest corners, felt ready. And you start to see the strategy. These roads weren't just about mobility. They were about presence. Wherever the road went, so did the empire. It stretched its fingers into every valley, every village, every mountain pass. It whispered, "We are watching. We are here." Even now, this path feels official. It hums with confidence. You see a stone drainage channel running along the side, carved to direct runoff away from the roadbed. Still functional. Still dry. Still smarter than your local sidewalk. Here's a little modern sting. When the Spanish conquered the Inca, they repurposed the royal roads for their own use. They didn't bother building new ones at first. They didn't need to. The Inca roads were that good. The conquistadors rode their horses along trails meant for bare feet and hooves. And in doing so, they unwittingly helped spread the same network they were trying to unravel. You reach a long, straight stretch now, one of those dramatic, cinematic roads that vanishes into the horizon. In the golden afternoon light, the stones glow. You walk in silence. The only sound is your breath, the crunch of gravel underfoot, and the soft, flapping whisper of your shadow chasing you. In the distance, you spot a solitary pillar of stone. A marker. A point of memory. You've walked part of an empire tonight. Not with wheels. Not with roads wide enough for trucks. But with intention. With planning. With purpose. The road ends when the empire ends. But not yet. Your footsteps echo now, not against cliffs or narrow walls, but into a vast expanse of silence. The highlands are gone, at least for the moment. Before you lies a stretch of rolling plains, dry as parchment and littered with low, stubbled brush. The kind of place where time seems to pool in the cracks. You squint into the heat haze. Far ahead, the road narrows again, curling toward the edge of something shimmering and hostile. Welcome to the desert. Yes, the Inca road went here, too. Through dry basins where rivers come to die. Through sand that blows sideways into your eyes. through valleys so hot the stones themselves seem to sweat. No shade. No water. Just sun, sky, and stone. But here's the thing, you're not lost. Not even a little. Because the road knows the way. In the desert stretches, where paving was impossible and the land too soft for stone, the Inca marked the road with cairns, stone piles carefully stacked every few meters. These mojones, as modern scholars sometimes call them, served like breadcrumbs for travelers. They showed direction, measured progress, and warned you, you're on the path. Don't stray. Fringe fact: some cairns were shaped symbolically, animal silhouettes, geometric designs, or lined up with celestial markers. The road was always more than a route. It was a message, a memory, a monument. You pause beside one of these piles and add a stone. Why not? It's the same thing Inca travelers did 500 years ago. It feels like the right thing to do. A moment of gratitude. A prayer. Or maybe just a chance to rest your legs. And speaking of legs, imagine walking this with a caravan of llamas under the blistering sun. There's a reason the Inca carefully timed travel through these regions. Journeys were coordinated so that Tambo's rest stops were positioned near reliable water sources. You spot one ahead now, half buried, sun-scorched, and empty. But it's there. A stubborn memory of planning. The Inca didn't just survive the desert. They engineered their way through it. Some roads here were built slightly elevated, raised berms of packed earth and stone that resisted floodwaters when the rare rains came. Others were embedded with small pebbles to create a more visible line across otherwise featureless terrain. Even when the road disappeared beneath sand, it continued like a promise made in stone. Historians still debate whether parts of the desert road network were ceremonial in nature. Why build so much infrastructure in places with so little settlement? Some theorize certain desert paths led only to sacred sites, isolated shrines, or pilgrimage destinations. Others think it was about control. If you can conquer the desert with your road, you can conquer anything. Here's a quirky desert tidbit for you. In parts of coastal Peru, the Inca constructed short windbreak walls along the sides of the road. Low stone barriers that blocked the constant blowing sand. Nothing elaborate, just enough to keep the route visible. The ancient equivalent of those little fences you see at airports to keep people from wandering into runways. And then, just as you start to forget you're crossing one of the harshest environments on Earth, you stumble upon a geoglyph. At first, it looks like random grooves in the sand. But then you step back, or maybe squint from a higher ridge, and it forms a shape. An animal. A spiral. Maybe a set of lines pointing to the horizon. The Nazca weren't Inca, but the empire absorbed their territory. And some of the Great Road crosses the same landscape where the Nazca etched their massive, mysterious lines into the desert floor. Coincidence? Or deliberate overlap? Some scholars suggest the Inca roads respected these lines, aligning certain stretches to avoid disrupting them, or even intentionally incorporating them into the landscape's symbolic geography. Others aren't so sure. But one thing's clear: the desert, even in its emptiness, was full of meaning. You keep walking, thirsty now. The heat presses down like a judgment. But the road continues, undeterred. You cross shallow gullies reinforced with stone-lined channels, Inca-made to guide runoff away from the roadbed. You spot low retaining walls, built not for people, but to keep sand from encroaching. Every foot of this path whispers, "We thought of that." And here's a beautiful irony: the desert might have helped preserve these roads better than the highlands. With little rain and fewer people, the paths have remained visible for centuries. Some stretches still bear the marks of Inca sandals. Not potholes. Not erosion. Just the faint memory of feet. The wind picks up, sending a whirl of sand across your path. You pull your cloak tighter, shielding your eyes. In the distance, a column of dust suggests another traveler. Real? Imagined? Maybe a ghost caravan of traders, long since vanished, still walking their assigned route under a sun that doesn't care. You rest briefly beneath the crumbling arch of another tambo, barely standing, but its doorway still frames the view of the path ahead. You sip from your canteen. The air smells like salt, dust, and the memory of maize. In the Inca worldview, the desert wasn't barren. It was alive. Spirits lived in the sand, in the rocks, in the sky above. Offerings were made before long desert crossings, coca leaves scattered into the wind, a few drops of treacherous spilled into the dust. Small rituals to protect the traveler. Or maybe to remind the road, I respect you. Please don't erase me. You stand again, knees cracking. The sun is lower now. The road stretches toward the horizon, cairns like dots on a silent page. This stretch wasn't made for the faint-hearted. But it was made. And it still holds. Even in silence. Even under sand. You reach the edge of the desert just as the light begins to soften, hazy orange bleeding into purple, shadows lengthening like they're stretching before bed. And then, as if the road sensed your exhaustion, the ground begins to rise again. Not sharply like the cliffs earlier, but in slow, deliberate steps. Terraces. Carved into the land like shelves in a giant's pantry. You've entered agricultural country now, where the road doesn't just move people. It feeds them. The Inca Empire, as grand and sprawling as it was, still had one non-negotiable need: food. Lots of it. And not just for survival. For power. For tribute. For trade. So what do you do when your empire stretches from the jungle to the mountaintops, over thousands of miles of wildly different terrain? You build staircases for crops. These terraces, andans, weren't just clever. They were revolutionary. Carved into steep slopes, they turned unusable land into thriving farmland. Imagine layers upon layers of stone-walled garden beds wrapping around mountains like leafy necklaces. Each one designed to capture water, reduce erosion, and create microclimates. Potato at the top. Maize in the middle. Quinoa near the base. The Inca road passed right through these agricultural zones, not as a side attraction, but as a lifeline. It connected farms to storehouses, storehouses to cities, cities to Cusco. The path you're walking now may have once been crowded with workers hauling bushels of tubers, baskets of beans, or pots of aluco, a neon-colored root vegetable that honestly looks like it belongs in a sci-fi salad. Historians still debate whether these terraces were first used by the Inca or inherited from earlier cultures like the Wari. Either way, the Inca perfected the system and integrated it with their roads. Each farming area was part of a logistical web. You couldn't move armies without food. You couldn't store food without roads. You reach a fork in the path, one branch dipping toward a sunken, rectangular field surrounded by low stone walls. A coach's ancient agricultural reservoirs. These weren't ponds. They were data systems. Designed to gather rainwater, store it, and release it slowly across the terraces. It's passive irrigation. You didn't need a faucet. The land knew how to hydrate itself. Quirky detail. Some of these terraces were engineered with gravel layers beneath the soil. This allowed water to drain just enough, not too fast, not too slow. Kind of like the Goldilocks of agriculture. Even modern hydrologists are impressed. You pass a group of low stone structures, Colcas Inca storage houses. Their design was genius. High walls for cool shade, ventilation holes to prevent mold, and raised floors to keep rodents out. Inside, they stored freeze-dried potatoes, chuno, dried meats, corn, beans, and even textiles. Freeze-dried. Yap. The Andean nights were so cold, the Inca took advantage. They left potatoes out overnight to freeze, then stomped the moisture out by foot the next day. Repeat a few times, and boom, portable food with a shelf life longer than your average social media trend. These kolkhass weren't just for locals, they were state-run, part of the empire's economic system. Nearby communities paid their taxes not in coins, but in labor and goods. The road you're walking helped distribute that wealth. A llama train might arrive today, and by tomorrow, those potatoes are halfway to the coast. And the state knew exactly what it had, too. The quipu keepers kept records of what each warehouse stored, what went in, what went out. A data trail, long before spreadsheets were a thing. You rest briefly beside a flat stone embedded with what looks like a carved grid. Some scholars think these were tally markers. Others say they were ritual objects, or even game boards. The Inca didn't always separate the practical from the symbolic. Growing food could be sacred. Managing inventory might involve a prayer or two. From your perch, you see fields spreading outward like puzzle pieces. Some are still cultivated today, potatoes blooming in purple, yellow, and red. Others lie dormant, but the bones are there, the walls, the water channels, the ancient math etched into the soil. And yes, there were roads through all of it. Small feeder paths branched from the main arteries, wrapping between plots and connecting farms to villages. The road wasn't just a highway, it was a capillary system. It reached everywhere, especially where food was grown. Fringe detail for your midnight musing, some farming terraces were experimental. That's right. The Inca had agricultural research centers. The most famous is Murray, a system of concentric terraces forming natural amphitheaters with varied microclimates. Each level had its own temperature, wind, and moisture pattern. It's like a living greenhouse dialed in with millimeter precision. Why? To see what crops grew best where. They tested different varieties of maize, potatoes, herbs, even plants from the Amazon. The Inca were optimizing yield before the term data-driven farming even existed. You walk now along a road with irrigation channels on both sides, still flowing with crystal-clear water. It trickles past your feet like it's on its own mission, maybe to a terrace below. Maybe to someone's field. The water, like the road, always moves forward. You pass another tambo. This one smells faintly of herbs and ash. Maybe an offering was made here not long ago. Even now, in modern Andean villages, the legacy of these farming roads persists. People still plant in terraces. They still walk the ancient trails to get to their plots. The past hasn't gone, it's just layered beneath the present, like silt in a fertile riverbed. And you keep walking. The sun has dipped lower, casting long shadows across the terraces. A cool breeze slides in from the mountains. You wrap your poncho tighter and listen to the rustling leaves, the faint whisper of water, and the ghost steps of farmers long gone. This road didn't just connect cities. It connected harvests. It linked famine to abundance, labor to empire. It made food move. And so you move with it. You climb again, breath catching in your throat as the altitude reasserts itself, thin air pressing gently against your lungs like a reminder, this is no casual stroll. The road tightens. The air chills. And the walls of the mountains begin to close in. You've entered the realm of mountain passes, those narrow necks of the Andes where the road clings to cliff edges and squeezes between jagged peaks. Places where the sky feels a little too close and the ground a little too far away. And yet, the road is still here. Still carved, still level, still insisting that yes, you can go this way. You stop for a moment at a tight switchback. To your left, a plummeting drop into a misty gorge. To your right, a sheer wall where lichens cling like stubborn graffiti. The path you stand on is no wider than a kitchen counter, and yet, it's been here for over 5 centuries. The Inca didn't just build roads. They threaded them into the spine of the continent. These high passes were some of the most impressive feats of Inca engineering. Where others would have turned back, The Inca simply adapted. They carved steps into cliffsides. They widened ledges with retaining walls. They chiseled handholds into the stone. Sometimes they even tunneled through rock to keep the path level and avoid dangerous detours. Fringe fact: in some high-altitude stretches, the Inca placed small piles of white stones, apachetas, at the highest points of the trail. Travelers added to them as offerings to the mountain gods, asking for safe passage. You're supposed to do it too. So you find a small, rounded rock and set it atop the pile. One more whisper into the wind. Historians still argue whether these mountain passes were used year-round or seasonally, based on snowfall and risk of landslides. Some believe the Inca had alternate routes for winter months, slower but safer. Others argue that messengers braved the heights no matter the weather, especially if the emperor was waiting for news. You pass an overhang where the road has been carefully cut directly into the cliff face. It's almost hidden from view, just a line of stone tucked into the shadows. A modern hiker might miss it entirely. But the Inca, they didn't just use the mountains. They listened to them, followed their contours, treated them not as barriers but as guides. And then, around a bend, you spot something that makes your legs lock up a little. Steps. Not just a few. Hundreds. They rise straight up the mountainside in a staircase so steep it seems to defy physics. These aren't neat, suburban porch steps. They're irregular, rugged, hand-carved blocks of stone with risers taller than your knees. This isn't just climbing. This is a vertical sprint. And yet, this was the highway. You take it slow, step by uneven step, calves burning, lungs dragging in air like it's been rationed. Halfway up, you stop at a wide flat ledge that seems placed there precisely for people like you, those suddenly remembering they have a deep emotional attachment to oxygen. Here's a curious little twist. The Inca adapted these staircases not just for humans, but for llamas. Yes, llamas climbed them too. When the incline was too sharp for a ramp, they trained the animals to manage steep, uneven steps with careful, deliberate hooves. Try getting your family dog to climb a spiral staircase, and you'll appreciate how impressive that is. You reach the top and are greeted by a view that's almost offensive in its grandeur. A valley opens below you like a book, mist curling through the folds of the earth. In the far distance, the glint of another road snakes along a ridge. You realize, for the first time, just how connected everything is. The valleys, the peaks, the plains, the sea, the forest, all threaded by this ancient arterial system. It's not just impressive, it's intimate. And it had to be. These high-altitude roads weren't just for trade or messengers, they were also military highways. From here, Inca generals could move troops with shocking speed. Strategic garrisons dotted the highlands, positioned near passes just like this one. And because the roads were so well built, even in terrain that should have made engineers weep, they allowed for quick deployments, sudden offensives, and constant surveillance. You pass a stone wall with lookout holes, narrow slits carved into the stone to observe the path without revealing the watcher. A fortress once stood here, or perhaps just a way station with teeth. Not all tambos were peaceful little inns. Some were militarized outposts, built to guard key passes and inspect travelers. Quirky fact: the Inca had a kind of passport system. If you were moving through certain areas, especially near sacred or strategic sites, you needed permission from local administrators. The road may have been public, but access was managed. Bureaucracy on foot. As you descend now into the next valley, the trail turns to loose gravel, and the wind sharpens with altitude. The air smells like snow and stone. Your fingers brush the cold rock walls lining the road, and you wonder how many hands touched them before you. Couriers, warriors, priests, tax collectors, refugees. You reach a spot where the trail is crossed by a small aqueduct, still trickling with meltwater from the peaks above. It slides beneath your feet with that quiet confidence the Inca were so good at engineering. Water in the mountains is rare, valuable, and sacred. So they guided it gently, respectfully, with channels carved by hand. You walk again, now with the sound of your own breath and boots filling the silence. Even the birds are quiet here, as if in awe of what's been built. The mountains give nothing for free. Every step of this road was earned. Every slab of stone was carried, dragged, or carved in place without the wheel, the draft animal, or iron tools. Just hands. Just minds. Just time. You glance up. Another staircase looms in the distance. And you smile. Because now you get it. This isn't just a road. It's a lesson in persistence. The stairs wind down now, not up. Your knees ache with each descent. It's a different kind of struggle, more careful, more cautious. Gravity is helping you, yes, but a little too much. One wrong step, and you'll be the fastest Inca courier this side of the afterlife. But the mountain gives way, slowly, to mist. The stone path becomes damp beneath your feet. The moss thicker. The calls of distant birds more vibrant. You're descending into the edge of the Amazonian fringe, where the Andes melt into the jungle, and the road starts to whisper in another dialect entirely. And yet, it's still the Inca road. This section feels different. Wilder. Closer to reclaiming itself. Vines snake along the stone walls. Ferns curl over the edges. You brush aside a leaf the size of your torso and duck beneath a low branch. It's beautiful. Lush. And also, deeply unnerving. Because who builds roads in the jungle? Apparently, the Inca. Not many people realize it, but the empire extended into the cloud forest and upper Amazon basin, territories thick with life, thick with rain, and thick with trouble. The kind of terrain that would make most empires say no, thank you, and turn back. But the Inca, they leaned in. You move cautiously along a narrow stretch, the road now formed from flagstones laid in tight sequence, with drainage channels carved to each side. Every few meters, a notch in the rock diverts water off the trail. Ingenious. Because in this wet, leafy world, water isn't just rain, it's an invasion. The jungle wants to eat everything, especially roads. Historians still argue whether these jungle paths were meant for regular travel or served more as military and ceremonial corridors. Some believe they were deliberately hidden, disappearing into foliage, blending into the landscape to protect sacred sites. Others say they were lifelines to frontier outposts and supply routes to forest communities now long gone. But one thing is certain, the Inca didn't treat the jungle as an obstacle. They treated it like a negotiation. The road here is more intimate, woven through nature rather than imposed on it. No dramatic cliff roads. No wide plazas. Just careful, quiet progress. Fringe fact. In some parts of the jungle, Inca engineers reportedly used living trees as part of bridge supports and structural networks. Instead of cutting everything down, they encouraged growth in specific shapes, guiding nature to hold their work in place. Which is either deeply sustainable, or borderline magical. You stop at a clearing, a tiny plaza overgrown with moss and silence. At its center stands a carved stone basin. A spring flows into it from a crack in the rock. Maybe it was a resting place for messengers. Maybe a shrine. Or maybe just a pause point, where the jungle offered refreshment and the road politely accepted. The humidity drapes itself across your shoulders like a heavy blanket. You hear a monkey call from somewhere deep in the trees, and a chorus of unseen insects sings from the underbrush. It's a far cry from the dry highlands or the icy passes. But this, too, was part of the empire's heartbeat. The jungle wasn't just full of trees, it was full of people. The Inca didn't rule the deep Amazon. but they had contact with many forest tribes. Some paid tribute, some traded, some fought back. And the road was the interface, both shield and handshake. You pass what looks like the ruins of a tambo, half swallowed by green. Vines curl through the old window frames. A spider the size of your thumb watches you with mild curiosity. The jungle is doing what it does best, taking back. And yet, the stone holds. The road, though slippery and overgrown, still directs you. And here's a quirky detail. The Inca likely had specialized jungle messengers who could navigate these overgrown routes at speed. Runners who could dodge snakes, leap fallen logs, and interpret the dense, humid silence like a language. These weren't your high-altitude chaskies, they were adapted to a different rhythm. Possibly even trained in tree climbing or river fording. Imagine it, a chusky dashing through vines, kipu bouncing at his hip, sweat pouring down his back, delivering a coded message to a hidden outpost nestled in a canopy so thick it never sees full sunlight. You continue walking, slipping occasionally on damp stone. The road here doesn't command the landscape, it negotiates with it. You feel like a guest. A welcomed one, maybe, but still a guest. And then, ahead, another bridge. Not grass this time. Not stone either. A log bridge, spanning a muddy chasm, with planks bound by vines and anchored to tree trunks. Ancient. Maybe. Rebuilt over and over by villagers who still use this path. Likely. This is the kind of roadwork that doesn't last centuries unless someone wants it to. You cross, heart thudding, not from fear this time, but from awe. The road endures because someone kept walking it, kept repairing it, kept believing in its purpose. Historians often overlook this stretch of the empire. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't Cusco. But here, in the dripping silence, you feel something sacred. The Inca didn't just build roads to dominate the land. They built them to understand it. The light begins to fade now, jungle twilight, fast and humid. You light a small torch and move slowly. The road narrows to a footpath, slick with moss. You pass a wall barely visible beneath a curtain of leaves. A structure, once. A checkpoint. A shrine. You touch it gently, as if you might wake something old. The Amazon doesn't announce its history. It buries it. And yet, beneath the green, the road remembers. The torch flickers. The jungle deepens. And just when you begin to think the road has vanished entirely beneath the green, it surprises you again. You emerge onto a causeway. It stretches out like a mirage in stone, a raised path, just wide enough for a pair of humans or a string of llamas, bordered by low retaining walls. Below it, marshland. Reeds. Slow, silvery water that reflects your torchlight like trembling glass. This is no random footpath. You're walking on a floating road. Not floating in the sci-fi, hovercar kind of way, but engineered with such cunning that the water doesn't reclaim it. The Inca laid layers of gravel and rock, topped with earth, edged with stone. It hovers just above the water line, like a tightrope across a swamp. In some regions, they even packed reed mats beneath the stone to create buoyancy and prevent sinking. Fringe fact. These causeways weren't just functional. Some were aligned with seasonal stars. That's right. In certain lowland regions, researchers have found Inca road segments that point directly toward constellations significant to Andean cosmology, suggesting the road didn't just move the body, but also mapped the heavens. You pause for a moment, watching the moonlight ripple across the marsh. Somewhere nearby, a frog croaks. A bird shifts in the reeds. The road, as always, stays steady, silent, waiting. And it wasn't only for people. Alongside many causeways like this ran narrow llama lanes, parallel footpaths worn smooth by the padded hooves of South America's favorite pack animals. Llamas weren't just beasts of burden. They were status symbols, mobile granaries, and sometimes even tax payments. Don't have silver? No problem. Pay in livestock. You keep moving, the soft squish of nearby bog giving way to the crunch of gravel beneath your feet. The road here is deceptively simple, but its complexity is in the preparation. In swampy regions, the Inca had to manage not just elevation, but seasonal flooding. They knew which times of year the waters would rise. They built drainage trenches and culverts beneath the paths to redirect overflow. Some of these are still visible angled channels that carry water like tiny, forgotten rivers. Historians still debate how much of this lowland road network was used consistently. Some believe it was seasonal, traveled only when waters were low. Others suggest the Inca had floating platforms or temporary causeways built by local labor groups to fill in the gaps when needed. There's evidence that portions of marshland roads were rebuilt annually, like the rope bridges, to ensure passage for imperial officials and military scouts. As the marsh thins out and solid ground returns beneath your steps, you spot something odd, a stone slab, half submerged in the mud, carved with grooves in a strange zigzag pattern. A quipu? A trail marker? A star chart? Archaeologists aren't sure. It might be nothing. It might be the ancient equivalent of a road sign that once said caution, sacred waters ahead. You press onward, the road curving now toward higher terrain, a low ridge that lifts you back into drier forest. The vegetation shifts again. Thinner trees. More light. A breeze that actually smells like civilization. And then, suddenly, a road hub. A four-way intersection carved from perfectly cut stone, with each direction marked by a short, upright pillar. You're at what would have been a major convergence point, where several roads from distant corners of the empire met. Trade routes, pilgrimage trails, diplomatic channels. A bottleneck of movement and meaning. You imagine it bustling. Couriers swapping quipu. Traders resting with their llamas. Priests preparing offerings before heading toward a sacred mountain. Perhaps even an Inca administrator, standing at the center of the crossroads, pointing directions like a divine traffic cop. Quirky detail, at major hubs like these, the Inca often built small ceremonial platforms, raised circular stages where rituals were performed before journeys began or concluded. Not temples exactly, but spiritual checkpoints. Ask for protection. Give thanks for safe travel. Honor the apis, the sacred mountain spirits that governed every direction. You step up onto one of these stone platforms. It's cracked now. Mossy, but still solid. You spin slowly, taking in the four directions of the ancient empire: north, south, east, west. It's not a compass. It's a cosmic alignment. Every road here led somewhere important, and somewhere sacred. Historians still argue whether these hubs were pre-planned or evolved naturally through use. Some scholars suggest the Inca inherited certain crossroads from earlier civilizations and upgraded them, integrating them into their own system. Others believe they were designed from the outset, strategically chosen for altitude, visibility, and access to resources. Either way, they worked. And standing here now, you understand something subtle, but powerful. The road wasn't just physical infrastructure. It was behavioral architecture. It told people where to go, how to move, who to meet, where to stop. It shaped the rhythms of empire, not by force, but by suggestion. The sun has set completely now. A few stars peek through the canopy. You light your torch again and choose the northern path. The one leading up. Always up. You walk in silence, letting your feet follow the grooves laid down by centuries of repetition. Step after step. Llama after llama. Messenger after messenger. Until even your own movement starts to feel familiar. Like you've been here before. And maybe, in some small, cosmic way, you have. Because the Inca road never ended. Not really. It just got quieter. And now you're walking it again. You follow the northern road, and it rewards you with one of those landscapes that feels like it belongs on a calendar or a myth. Rolling green hills, dotted with grazing llamas. Snow-capped peaks looming in the distance. Stone terraces cascading down the slopes like frozen waterfalls. The path beneath your feet is wide again, paved with carefully fitted slabs so tight that not even a blade of grass pokes between them. This is a royal approach. You're entering the outer ring of the most sacred and centralized part of the Inca road system, the spine of Tawantinsuyu. And at the heart of it, Cusco, the navel of the world. The Inca called it Cosco, and it wasn't just a city. It was a statement. Built in the shape of a puma, divided into quadrants that mirrored the four Suyus of the empire, it was where all roads, literal and spiritual, converged. Every route you've walked so far has pointed here, even when you didn't know it. And the roads approaching Cusco reflected its importance. You pass what's left of an Inca checkpoint, marked by standing stones in a fan-like arrangement. These weren't just border posts, they were ritual filters. Before entering the sacred center of the empire, travelers paused here. Officials inspected cargo. Priests gave blessings. Sometimes sacrifices were made, not necessarily bloody ones, just tokens. Coca leaves. Cloth. Llama hair. Fringe fact, there were ritual cleansing pools near some checkpoints. Travelers would wash their hands, faces, and feet before proceeding. Think of it like a spiritual car wash, but for humans who just crossed mountain passes and jungle paths. You kneel beside what might have been one of those pools, now dry, but still framed in polished stone. The water once reflected the sky, just as the city ahead reflected the empire. Historians still debate how strictly controlled access to Cusco was. Some believe it was wide open to everyone, a kind of capital of the people. Others argue only the nobility and officials could walk the main arteries straight into its ceremonial core. Either way, the road shaped perception. Entering Cusco wasn't just an arrival. It was a transition. The closer you get, the more ornate the road becomes. It's not just stones now, it's symbolic geometry. Curved edges. Insets of lighter stone forming patterns. Even now, weathered by time, you can trace faint spiral designs, or a checkerboard of alternating stones. This wasn't roadwork. This was artwork. And here comes a quirky detail. Some sections of the road leading into Cusco included sound design. No, really. The spacing and tilt of the stones affected the clop of llama hooves or human footsteps, creating a kind of rhythmic welcome. A sonic prelude to entering the navel of the empire. You hear that rhythm now in your own steps. Thump, scrape, thump. The beat of travel. The beat of arrival. Along the road, walls rise, not buildings yet, but long stretches of finely fitted stone. The kind that don't need mortar because they were carved to interlock like Tetris blocks. Their purpose? Some were boundary markers, physical indicators that you were entering a different zone. Others were protective. And still others, decorative. Just there to say, you're not in the provinces anymore. You crest a hill and catch your first full glimpse of the Cusco Valley. Even in the fading light, it stuns you. The city sits like a jewel, cradled between mountains, its ancient stone temples glowing gold in your imagination even if the real gold is long gone. In the distance, the ruins of Sacsayhuaman crown a ridge above the city, a fortress, a ceremonial site. Historians still argue. But one thing's certain, from up there, you could have watched every road that ever mattered snake its way into the capital. And below, where those roads finally converge, the plaza. Imagine it at the height of the empire. Llamas tied in neat rows. Messengers handing off quipus. Market stalls bursting with maize, peppers, and smoked meat. Nobles in embroidered tunics walking beside barefoot farmers. Priests with coca-stained lips reciting prayers to the sun. The road didn't just bring these people here. It created them. It's worth pausing here to consider just how unique this entire system was. No wheels. No iron tools. No written language. And yet, the roads managed to coordinate a continental empire. Not with brute force, but with infrastructure so good, people used it centuries after its builders were gone. That's the part we rarely talk about, what the road meant after the empire fell. Because when the Spanish arrived and Cusco was taken, they didn't demolish the road network. They used it. It was too effective to ignore. They sent soldiers, horses, and missionaries down paths meant for bare feet and calloused hands. Some Inca roads were widened, others paved over, but many were just inherited. And even now, many modern highways in Peru, Ecuador, Bolivia, and Chile follow the same routes. The veins of the empire still pulse beneath asphalt and tire tread. But you're not there yet. You stop at a carved stone slab, flat, clean, a perfect place to sit. Ahead lies the final approach into Cusco. The road fans out slightly, forming a ceremonial avenue. In some ancient festivals, this stretch was lined with dancers, musicians, and banners. It wasn't just about logistics. It was about theater. The empire announced itself with movement. And maybe that's the secret to the whole thing. The Inca didn't build roads because they liked walking. They built them because they believed in motion as power. They didn't need the wheel. They had legs. They had llamas. They had a network. A road wasn't a path. It was a promise. And now you're nearly at its heart. The torch burns lower. The city glows ahead. The stone beneath your feet is smoother than ever. You take a breath, feeling the weight of travel, of time, settle across your shoulders like a royal cloak. You rise. And walk on. The stones beneath your feet have changed again. Smoother. Tighter. Slightly concave from centuries of wear. This stretch doesn't just look old, it feels ancient, like it remembers every footstep that's passed over it. You've entered Cusco's core, where every pebble was placed not just for purpose, but for power. This isn't just any road. You're on the Capac-Nan, the Great Inca Road. This was the imperial artery, the ceremonial expressway, the cosmic cord tying heaven to earth. If Tawantinsuyu was a body, this road was the spine. And you're walking directly along it, toward the beating heart of an empire that once ruled 12 million people without a single coin, wheel, or written word. And it's oddly quiet. Sure, today Cusco is a bustling modern city. But at this moment, in your imagination, or maybe your memory, it's dawn in the imperial era. The first rays of sun are pouring over the rooftops, striking the gilded walls of the Coricancha, the temple of the sun, just ahead. And suddenly, you understand why the road was so carefully aligned. The Capac-Nan didn't just lead to temples. It framed them. Every step of this road was engineered with astronomical intention. It pointed to solstices, equinoxes, sacred mountains on the horizon. The Inca didn't separate walking from worship. The journey was the ritual. And now, your feet bring you to the very threshold of the Coricancha. Once covered in sheets of gold so blinding they reflected sunlight into neighboring courtyards, it was the axis mundi of Inca cosmology. From this temple, the empire was divided into its four great suyus, northwest to Chinkasuyu, northeast to Antisuyu, southwest to Kuntisuyu, southeast to Kulasuyu. The roads you've walked, they all started here. Fringe fact, the Coricancha wasn't only spiritual. It was also scientific. Within its walls, the Inca studied astronomy, tracked agricultural seasons, and observed solar alignments that shaped planting calendars. And the lines of the Capac-Nan were like celestial wires, stretching outward from this observatory temple like rays of the sun. You run your hand along the temple's outer wall. The stonework here is legendary. Not one gap, not one chink. Each block weighs several tons, but fits so precisely that even modern engineers still argue how it was done. And there's the debate. Some scholars believe the stones were shaped using wooden pounding tools and abrasives. Others think they used bronze chisels and water to split rock. And then there are the fringe theorists who whisper about ancient technology, forgotten knowledge, or, let's be honest, aliens with laser levels. But one truth remains: it was built by people. With hands, and time, and genius. Just beyond the Coricancha, the road opens into the Jorge Pata, the Great Plaza. Imagine it in full festival. Thousands gathered in vivid textiles, priests reciting invocations in Quechua, the emperor, the Sapa Inca, standing at a golden platform, addressing his subjects like a living sun. This was more than ceremony. It was statecraft in motion. And it only worked because of the road. The Great Road didn't just bring people to Cusco, it brought loyalty, tribute, identity. Every community in the empire, from the coldest mountain hamlets to the steamy edge of the Amazon, knew their place because they were connected. They sent their textiles, maize, pottery, soldiers, and stories along these roads. Quirky tradition. Each region brought its own ceremonial dancers and musicians to Cusco's great festivals. And each had its own unique rhythm and instruments. Imagine the entire Andean world converging in one plaza, each group with its own beat, its own song, its own story, but all dancing on the same stone road. You cross the plaza slowly now, listening to echoes that only you can hear. Somewhere, a flute lingers. A drumbeat. A chant. The Great Road has carried these sounds farther than any empire ever could. But then you notice something strange. The road doesn't end here. It keeps going through the plaza, past the temples, back out the other side. Because for the Inca, Cusco wasn't a destination. It was a node, the center of a web. You pass what's left of a great stairway once leading to the Inca Trail, that famed segment of the road that climbs into the cloud forest and ends at Machu Picchu, the enigmatic royal retreat hidden deep in the mountains. But Machu Picchu? That was just one destination. There were hundreds, maybe thousands, of settlements, fortresses, way stations, and shrines tied together by this unmatched road system. Most still lie buried under forest, forgotten by GPS, but not by memory. Historians still debate how long it took to build the entire Capac Nan. Some say generations. Others suggest it was a forever project, always under repair, always growing, like a living thing. Which makes sense, really. You don't build 24,000 miles of roads because you're trying to finish a job. You build them because you're trying to connect to people. And maybe that's the quiet brilliance of it. The Inca Road wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't paved in marble or engraved with victories. It was humble, efficient, often invisible unless you knew where to look. But it worked. And today, as your steps echo in this quiet plaza, where asphalt has been laid over stone, and souvenir shops sit beside sacred walls, you realize something profound. You've never stopped walking the Inca Road. Not really. It's under modern roads. Under railways. Under hiking trails. It's in stories told by villagers. In stones uncovered by archaeologists. In songs and languages and footsteps passed down like heirlooms. And here, in Cusco, you finally feel it. The road didn't just hold up the empire. It held up everyone. You leave the plaza behind, stepping out of Cusco's ceremonial core. But the road doesn't let you go gently. It tugs you forward, wrapping around the city's edges like a vine clinging to stone. You're following the Suyus now, the four great arms of the empire, each one stretching toward a corner of the known world. You choose Chinque Suyu, the northwestern path, the one that would eventually lead you all the way to the coast and beyond, into desert kingdoms and fishing villages where nets mattered more than llamas. But for now, the road clings to the hills, gradually leading you downward. And something shifts. The road feels different now, imperial, but practical. Not ceremonial anymore, but administrative. You're walking the same route officials took when they traveled between provinces, overseeing production, collecting tribute, or investigating complaints. Think of it as the Inca version of a bureaucratic highway. Quirky twist. The Inca had inspectors, called Tokoirikak, or he who sees all, who traveled these roads conducting audits. Of people. Of storehouses. Of crops. Imagine a guy showing up unannounced in your village with a quipu and a 1,000-yard stare, ready to grill you about your maize yields. No clipboard. Just a memory like a spreadsheet and the power of the state in his sandals. The road supports this whole system because it's more than stone. It's logistics, stretched across terrain so diverse it would break most empires. You pass another tambo, this one larger than most. An administrative complex, not just a rest stop. Low stone buildings fan out around a central courtyard. You peek into one, storehouse. Another, residence, with what may have once been a small hearth. Another, an open space with niches in the wall, probably for rituals or storing precious items. Historians still debate what determined the size and placement of these way stations. Some think it was pure math, distance between them based on a day's walk. Others argue their size depended on local resources, or the political importance of the region. What's clear? No part of the empire was ever too far. And the road made that possible. You pass a series of walls and markers, simple but repeating. They once marked provincial boundaries, divisions of space not drawn on maps, but walked, touched, and felt underfoot. For the Inca, geography wasn't abstract. It was lived. If you were from a village in the highlands and got called to Cusco, you didn't pull out a map, you followed the road. And when you passed one of these markers, you knew you'd entered another suyu. Fringe detail. There's evidence the Inca used coded paving stones to signify transitions, certain patterns or embedded symbols that may have silently told travelers what region they were entering. Like ancient QR codes, just more stylish. You round a bend, and the valley opens again. But now, far in the distance, you see something new, a line across the landscape. A straight, unnatural slash that cuts across hills and riverbeds. It's a road segment, intact, stretching for miles in arrow-straight precision. And it's not alone. All around you, you begin to notice remnants of parallel roads, side paths, runners' lanes, old trade detours. Some barely more than foot trails now. Others fully paved and partially buried under time. This wasn't just one road, it was a network. Redundant. Resilient. Designed so that if a section collapsed due to earthquake or flood, movement didn't stop. The empire had backups. Alternatives. Detours. You smile. The Inca didn't just build for now. They built for always. You descend into a smaller town, probably a former regional capital. Its plaza sits directly along the road, like a pearl threaded onto a necklace. That's no accident. Roads didn't skirt communities, they were the backbone of them. Markets sprang up where roads met. So did rituals. So did marriages, messengers, gossip, and revolutions. Here, you find a rock outcrop with a deep groove carved into it, so deep and smooth it must have been worn by thousands of feet, hooves, and years. You place your hand into it. It's warm from the sun, and full of memory. You imagine a messenger here 500 years ago, barefoot, quipu swinging, lungs bursting from the altitude, passing you without a word. Then gone. Over the hill. Into history. Quirky fact. Messengers often ran in relay teams, stationed at intervals along the road. Some were so fast that a message from Quito to Cusco, over 1,000 miles, could be delivered in under 5 days. That's faster than most medieval mail in Europe, and certainly quicker than a camel caravan. And here's where the road shows its final magic trick. It's not just stone. It's time. As you walk, you start to feel the overlap of centuries. A colonial chapel perched awkwardly on top of Inca foundations. A modern bus stop using a 600-year-old retaining wall as its backrest. Children walking home from school along the same path their ancestors once used to bring tribute to the Sapa Inca. The road hasn't vanished. It's just changed clothes. Historians often struggle to define where the road ends. Does it stop when the paving stops? When the empire fell? When the Spanish renamed the provinces? But the truth is simpler. The road ends nowhere. Because the road isn't the stones. It's the connection. It's the fact that you, right now, are walking in the footsteps of a civilization that managed to span 2,500 miles of coastline, mountains, jungle, and desert without a single wheel, and not only managed it, but made it feel inevitable. The Inca didn't just move people. They moved ideas, languages, corn, clothing styles, ceremonies, technology. They made movement itself a form of control and of belonging. And now here you are, moving forward, still connected, still walking. The road bends west now, coiling downward from the highlands toward the coast. You feel the air shift again, drier, warmer, a hint of salt riding the breeze. You're entering the coastal deserts, a final frontier in your journey and a testament to the adaptability of Inca engineering. No trees here, no mountains, just endless sun, sand, and stone. And yet, the road endures. It runs like a ribbon over beige hills, flanked by low retaining walls to keep it from vanishing into the dunes. Sometimes it's sunken, like a trough worn into the earth. Other times, it rises above the sand, a man-made path of compacted gravel and cobbled stone. You'd think a road here would bake and crumble. But the Inca understood desert terrain like it was a second language. They knew the danger wasn't just heat, it was erosion. So they built drainage ditches even in places that rarely saw rain. Why? Because when it did rain, the flash floods were merciless. The road had to be ready. Fringe fact, some segments of desert road were actually wider than mountain paths, designed to accommodate larger caravans and more frequent traffic. The coast was full of important towns and agricultural valleys, especially around modern-day Lima and Trujillo. And unlike the jungle or mountains, here, visibility stretched for miles. You could see travelers long before they arrived. And then, out of nowhere, you spot something surreal. A line of white stones, arranged in patterns along the road's edge. Not random. Intentional. These were desert beacons, navigation tools meant to keep the path visible even when sandstorms tried to erase it. Some scholars think they may have also had symbolic meaning, territorial markers, or messages to the gods. Historians still debate whether the Inca roads along the coast were primarily trade routes or sacred processional paths. Some stretches appear to connect pilgrimage centers, temples like Pachacamac, where the god of earthquakes was worshipped. Others lead directly to agricultural centers and fishing ports. But the duality isn't surprising. The Inca didn't separate the sacred and the practical. Roads could be both. And then you reach a fork. One path curves gently toward the ocean, a distant glimmer of silver. The other cuts inland, toward more storehouses, built into a desert bluff. The Inca called them kolkas, and they were the ancient world's version of walk-in pantries, cool, ventilated buildings filled with salted fish, dried potatoes, freeze-dried meats, and spare clothing. Even in the blistering desert, these warehouses stayed usable. Thanks to clever ventilation holes, Some storage centers have remained intact for centuries. Quirky twist. Some kolkas were guarded not by soldiers, but by llamas. Or rather, by the herders and their herds stationed nearby. It was cheaper, and culturally logical. Llamas weren't just pack animals, they were part of a living infrastructure, moving food and supplies from storehouse to city, back and forth, a kind of pre-industrial supply chain. You keep walking, the sun now lower in the sky, casting long shadows that stretch across the golden sand. And ahead, carved into the side of a rocky hill, something unexpected. A carving of a foot. Just a foot. Human-sized. Chiseled deep into stone. Was it a marker? A symbol for travelers? A prayer? No one knows. But it feels like a final signature, one human saying to another, yes, someone walked here. Yes, someone will again. And now, the coast. You crest one last sandy rise and see it, the Pacific Ocean, endless and soft, stretching to the horizon in a band of hazy blue. The road stops here, not with a wall, not with a gate, just a slow vanishing into beach sand. As if to say, this part is up to you now. You walk to the water's edge. Your feet touch the surf. Cool, briny foam washes over stone-worn soles. And you wonder, was this road ever truly meant to end? Because even now, centuries after the empire fell, after gold was stolen, temples shattered, and quipus burned, the road is still here. Beneath cities. Beneath jungles. Beneath time. And it still works. Maybe not as a highway, but as a memory. A whisper that says, look at what we built. Look at what we carried. Look at how far we walked. And with that, the waves fade into rhythm. Your breathing slows. And the road, finally, lets you rest. So now, as you settle under your blankets or sink into your pillow, let the Inca road fade gently behind your eyelids. Picture the path rising and falling with the hills, curling around mountains, slipping quietly through jungles, stretching like a long exhale across deserts and streams. There's no rush now. No messengers to chase. No emperors to serve. Just you, and the echo of thousands of footfalls beneath starlit skies. Feel the warmth of the stones that held up millions. The hush of wind through abandoned tambos. The slow hush of surf against a shore that once marked the edge of an empire. Let the knowledge settle. Not everything that lasts is made of steel. Some things endure because they were shaped by hands, by footsteps, by hearts that believed connection was worth the climb. Maybe tomorrow you'll take your own steps. Down a hallway. Through a forest. Around the corner to someplace familiar. And maybe you'll carry just a little of that Inca road with you, the steady rhythm, the quiet endurance, the idea that every step builds something lasting. But for now, let your mind wander, like a chasqui's message on the wind. Let your breath fall in time with the ancient rhythm. Let the road cradle you, stone by stone, into sleep. No wheels. No rush. Just peace. Just dreams. Just the long, quiet road, still holding you.